Welcome back, everybody, to another episode of Developing the Leader Within podcast. I'm Enrique Acosta Gonzalez, your host. And today I have another special guest. You know, we've been embarking in this 5 week, uh, basically, introduction to senior leaders that have done great things, are doing great things now after retirement, and also comprise my group of advisors. And today we're going to be talking about leadership and values, a very important topic. And I have Michael Jackson with us today. Mike, thanks for being with us and sharing your time. And we're just happy to have you.
You're quite welcome, Enrique. I can tell you I'm truly humbled and honored to, one, have been thought about in this capacity to offer, some perspective on leadership and values. And I'm looking forward to, the engagement today. So hopefully I can do it some justice today and folks will get something good out of it.
You will, I'm sure. Hey, Mike, before we get into all of the good stuff that we're going to be sharing about values, if you could just take a couple of minutes and introduce your background, maybe what you're doing now to the audience.
Okay, so I'll start from the beginning. I was born in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania in '66. Stayed there for about 6 years and then moved to Columbia, South Carolina, where I was raised for the majority of, for my adolescent life. Um, right after high school, thought I was going to be going off to college, Florida A&M University, got a scholarship, ironically for more of the business side of the house, nothing about nuclear power. I was all about numbers and administrative type stuff, and I thought I was going to be a certified public accountant. Got down to Florida A&M my freshman year, and then realized that they had given out too many scholarships to most of the accounting majors and business majors. So they presented us with options. Covered 3 years of our school. We had to pick up one, either our freshman or sophomore year. I was already homesick because it was the first time I was away from home. So I called my grandmother, who was raising me at the time, and said, "Hey, I want to come back to Columbia, get my job back, and just go to the University of South Carolina." That was the plan. So I had about three. They came and got me. Had about 3 months before I wound up where I was just sitting around waiting on, the fall semester to end and spring semester to start at Carolina. And a funny thing happened. All of the military branches, you know how the recruiters are. They bring in my phone because I'm not doing anything but just wasting my time at home. And my phone's ringing. Your Air Force, Army, Marines, and the military was the least of my thoughts. So I was like, no way I am joining the military. But I'll take a free lunch. So all of them took me out to lunch, gave me their spiel and what they can do. I scored pretty good on the ASVAB, so they were throwing all kinds of programs at me. Last but not least, the Navy came around and took me out to lunch, took me out to Red Lobster. So I thought I was eating pretty good at the time as an 18-year-old. And next thing you know, same day, they hit me with the nuclear power program and start throwing. And I'll tell you, full disclosure, they start throwing dollars at me, dollar amounts at me, and at the time, $20,000, for potential reenlistment bonus, $4,000 enlistment bonus, automatic advancement E4, potential of being an E5 in 2 years if you start reenlist. Those numbers start sounding good for an 18-year-old back in 1984. So the same day I was at the MEP station saying I do and marrying the Navy. Enlisted in a delayed entry program, was supposed to report June of the following year. Another funny thing happened. I got as I was waiting and waiting and waiting, I started getting bored. So I called my recruiter and said, "Hey, can you get me in to boot camp right after New Year?" And he said, "I got some good news and bad news for you. Yes, I can get you in early, but it'll have to be day after Christmas." So I'm in Columbia, South Carolina. It's 80 something degrees on Christmas Day. And I'm packing a little bag and getting ready to go to Great Lakes, Illinois on December the 26th, my first flight and land in the cold of Great Lakes in December. So that was a culture shock. Uh, Went through boot camp, did my A school there. Was already signed up for the nuclear power program. Went submarines right away because I get seasick, so I did not. And I saw how surface ships rock and roll from the commercials. So in a nutshell, did 20 years, wound up doing 32 years of service in the Navy after everything was said and done. First 20, submarine nuke, 4 different submarine platforms, and peppered with 3 nuclear instructor tours at the Moore training ships in Charleston in between all of those tours. 20-year point, thought I was going to retire. I almost sound like Mick Hurt. I saw his podcast and it was like deja vu for me because I heard him talk about he thought he was going to retire. Funny thing happened again. My wife knew that I wasn't ready to retire, so she gave me the basically the okay to don't come home until you're actually ready to come home. And that happened 5 times over. So I wound up getting selected for the CMC program right at my 20-year point. Um, After finishing up my last nuclear instructor tour. And then I did 5 CMC tours, 2 aviation, 1 base, the leadership schoolhouse, which you know, where we first, I think our paths first crossed, and then finished up at Navy Regis Southeast, flag level CMC assignment. After that, retired, obviously. I retired in December 2016, and uh, thought I was going to try and take maybe a year and a half off. My wife started getting tired of me and said, "You have to go work because you can only cut the grass so many times a week." And I was in a competition with my neighbors, and weather in South Carolina and Charleston is good pretty much year round, so you cut your grass all day long. 7 months later, I started floating my resume out. Wanted to get back, as sick as it sounds, into the nuclear power program, nuclear power community, commercial. But I also knew that I wanted to do leader development at some point in time again, because I really love doing that. Got hired on at St. Lucie Nuclear Plant in Jensen Beach, Florida, to go through senior reactor operators licensing. Ironically, my class is actually conducting their audit exams, and they'll be getting licensed in December, hopefully. But this opportunity, so I did 2 years down at St. Lucie. This opportunity presented itself to me last year, August of last year, and I had to jump all over it. What better way to be in my bread and butter, which is the nuclear field, and doing leader development. So in my current role, I am a senior program manager in learning delivery at the Institute of Nuclear Power Operations in Atlanta, headquartered in Atlanta, Georgia. We essentially provide support. We're more like the ISIC, if that makes sense from a military standpoint, um, to all of the commercial nuclear industry and nuclear sites throughout the United States, as well as we provide assistance and advisement and some oversight across the world as well. So our influence is felt worldwide when it comes to the nuclear industry. I teach leader development, mainly for next level leaders, which from a military comparison would be more like the chief's mess training. So this is kind of like right up my alley where you get to work with the folks in the middle of the organization and give them some tools for their toolbox to take back to their respective sites. And you know how the rest goes. So I've been here for a year and loving it. The only thing I'm not liking right now is virtual delivery of training. You know me, Enrique. I like I like moving my hands. I like looking at people in the face to see what I like challenging them directly to pull it out of them and get them out of their comfort zones in the classroom. And so I'm itching to get back in the classroom, but we are delivering virtual leadership training as well to still get it out to the industry. And that's kind of where I am right now.
Yeah, no, not only a wonderful and illustrious career. I love that similarity with Jim Hurt because it's like that, right? You do
Yeah,
so good, you do well, and people notice, and or circumstances provide the opportunity to continue to serve. And so, thank you for that. Yeah, I know you well as an instructor, so I know that you're itching to get back
Oh, yes.
into into the people, because that's really where the dynamics really come out to play.
Yes.
You get to see people right on the spot. You get to feel their feelings by their actions or reactions to what you're saying. And as an instructor, you kind of need that instant feedback of the faces, of the questions in the face,
Yeah.
and I know
Yeah.
how you operate well in that environment. Now, today we're going to be talking about leadership and values. Uh, you mentioned we first met at the CMC Cobb course
Hmm.
when I went up there. It was not as cold as it was in
Oh,
Great
yeah.
Lakes.
Right. Right. Right.
It
But
was
it was still a little
it was
nifty.
good. Yeah, it was good, and there's two things that struck me right from the beginning when I talk about introducing the course director, right? Michael Jackson, right? Michael Jackson. I was waiting for a dance or two, but no, nothing came out. But but immediately what I noticed was your poise, your confidence, and uh, your transparency. We at the leadership, and for those that don't know, I'm just to explain a little bit about the Command Leadership School. Command Leadership School is a school where all CO, XO, so commanding officers, executive officers, and CMC, Command Senior Chiefs, so Command Master Chiefs, they go for their initial training before they go into the job. So we train before you go to the job.
Right.
So that's a key.
Right. Right.
The key is to train people before you put them into the job. I know not all opportunities present themselves like that in corporate America,
Right.
but it would be a great model if you want to see some real good stuff come out of people. But so in that environment, you're surrounded by commanding officers, executive officers, and all kinds of CMCs, both afloat, air, submarine, region, what have you, and all these different platforms that are represented in that course. And we all get together and we learn not foundational leadership, but executive leadership, right? So there are different stages in your career where you learn different types of leadership, but this is the executive level. And your transparency was such a breath of fresh air, because you get surrounded sometimes by some haughty leaders,
Yeah.
right? And as we learn in school, and as we know in practice, that mantle of command and that authority of command, um, it's almost absolute at sometimes, if you're
Yeah.
not careful.
Yeah.
And but to have you guys that already had uh, not only experience command and service in command, but to teach us new ones coming in into those roles was such a great blessing. And so, thank you
Thank
for
you.
that
Thank you.
time that you spent up there. Definitely made an impact on me, and hence why you are one of my advisors. And folks, you heard me say the last 4 weeks, right? This is the fourth week of a 5-week series of military leaders and advisors to me. And Mike Jackson is one of the best. That's why he's there. So, Mike, when we're talking about values, right? Because this is one of those areas
Hmm.
that some leaders struggle with. We like it on paper, but not so much on practice sometimes. So, what does values mean to you, and how did that mold your career?
Well, it's kind of funny because, right, I remember one of my previous commanding officers, the last director I worked for at the leadership schoolhouse, um, Captain Mark Johnson. Hopefully he doesn't mind me dropping his name. But we used to have a lot of fireside chats, and he talked about values a lot. I don't know if you came through when he was up there. I think you came through, and
Yeah.
Captain Slotsky might have still been up there. But me and Captain Johnson used to have a lot of fireside chats where he would we would talk philosophically about the importance of values, right? And one of the things that he talked to me about was, and Mick Pond Stevens used to do the same thing when he came up. Most of my all of my time up there was during the time that he was Mick Pond, so I got to talk to him quite a bit. And when we talked about values, they always made sure that they drove the point home about when someone comes in the military, right? When they volunteer to serve, before they get to boot camp, they have a certain set of values, things that are important to them in life that motivate them to do what it is they do, that make them prioritize how they're going to operate and how they're going to go after whatever it is, their goals, taking care of their family, whatever the case may be. And more often than not, those values are, very few people, our values in the Navy, and core values are honor, courage, and commitment, right? You don't necessarily, as an 18-year-old or a young adult, come into the military with the exact same values that the organization has, right? So there's a delta that exists, and that then neither one of them, there's no right and wrong to it. What's important to you is what's important to you. But the important piece is getting in alignment, leadership, figuring out what it is that motivates that person, what it is at their core that is important to them so that they can um, um, so that they can unlock that, right? And they can attach themselves to it, unlock it, and help drive them to the end result, a win-win situation for the organization and the individual, right? Um, so for me, values is the starting point, right? I came in the Navy, and I can tell you that I know, looking back on things, that the things I valued as an 18-year-old, and probably all the way up until the time that I was, mid 20s, it took a while and someone holding the mirror up to me to get me to shift my values to be in alignment with what the Navy's values were at that time. And they were a lot more. I can't remember all of the principles. It was more than our current three core values that we have, right? And uh, so for me, I was always focused on, well, the things I value, my friendships before coming in the Navy, my family, which most people do, right? Everybody pretty much has that same common thread. Um, I valued that it was more important to be liked and cool than to wear my uniform the right way, than to clean up my uh, vernacular. Somebody's going to kill me for using that big word because they know I talk slang a lot. But um, you know, because getting rid of my potty mouth, so to speak. But for me at the time, my first few years, what I valued was not in alignment with, or not in total alignment with what the military uh, that what our military values were. And it took quite a bit of prodding and 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 breaking down my trust barriers that I had for the leaders above me to really work their way into understanding what made me tick, what was important to me and why it was important to me, and then getting that into line with what it was the organization's values were. Um, so, so values are important because it's the core of what drives individuals. It's the core of what drives me to this day. I mean, that's the starting point for everybody. It dictates what motivates you. It dictates what your preferences are. It dictates how your personality comes out because everything is centered and referenced on that. What is important, you know? Um, I don't know if I kind of went off a little bit on that. The question was, why, why are values important to me, and what does values mean to me, and how does that mold my career? That really happened. What I couldn't say that early on it molded my career because it took somebody injecting themselves. I'm gonna drop another name here. Retired Warrant Officer Ricky Sykes was my first mentor in the Navy. I was 6 years in. I transferred from U.S. Assignment Boulevard to more training ships 35 in Charleston, and he was my leading crew chief at the time. And he was he was a people person, but blunt to the point, and held you accountable for representing. And so one day he had a conversation with me about values, ironically. I had been there for about a year. I was already familiar with that platform, having just come from a similar platform. So the nuclear propulsion plant and that platform was really easy for me to pick up. But leadership skills I was lacking. So at this time, in the Navy and nuke program, we promote pretty quick. So I was already, a first class petty officer, E6. I would say I was an E6, not a first class petty officer, because I was not living the values of that. I was still too important for me to be cool and liked by everybody, as opposed to actually being a leader and an example. And I remember, no, I was going on 2 years. So after the first year, I had already qualified everything. I was one of the top instructors. And every class that graduated, he would always tell me, hey, you were voted most favorite instructor on our crew again. And, so I pat myself on the back, like, okay, being that is important to me. But at the time, I didn't care about whether or not I was either Sailor of the Quarter, Sailor of the Year, or anything. I didn't even know if my name was coming up for that, because I didn't care. It was too more important, and I valued being recognized by each class, whether a certificate came with it or not. That was what is important to me. Did they like me? Do I hear my name being said as the favorite instructor? So what happened was, I guess about, right at my second year, Sailor Yearboard was getting ready to come on. So we were doing third quarter, Sailor of the Quarter. And I didn't get selected, but I didn't know I was even put in for it. He pulls me aside after I got off watch, first half watch. He says, hey, come up to the LCC space. I want to talk to you. I said, all right, fine. I get up there, and this is the first time that Chief called me by my first name. He says, Mike. And I'm like, what's up, Chief? He goes, Mike, I'm telling you this as a friend, and I am telling you this as your LCC. He said, this is what we call a mirror check on your values. He said, you don't value being a sailor. You don't value being a first class petty officer. You don't value, he says, you're a great naval nuclear operator and supervisor. You're a great instructor, and that's it. And man, I swear, it hurt me to my core. So I'm sitting here and I got to take it from him, right? I'm getting mad. He can see that I'm getting mad, because now you're saying that I don't value being in the military. I don't value the military uh, discipline, the military protocol, military ethics and morals piece. And now you hitting me personally. So he says, I'm not looking for feedback. I'm telling you, this is what he says. I'm gonna give you some data points. He says, I've put your name. He says, you know how many times I put you in for Sailor of the Quarter? I said, no, and I don't care. So attitude's coming out again, right? And he goes, 3. He says, you know how many times you've come in last of the 4 candidates? Actually, it was 5 candidates at the time, because we had 5 crews. I said, how many times? He says, all 3 times. He says, you wanna know why? I said, I know, but you're gonna tell me. And he says, it's because every time somebody hears Petty Officer Jackson give him the check out in a queue, an F-bomb being dropped. Every time now, he said, now, I said you were a great instructor, but that's not professional as an instructor. You know your stuff, and you give, and the students they love coming to you for checkouts, but your military bearing is way off. And he said, so uh, 3 times you've come in last of all 5 candidates. You wonder why? I said, I don't care why. It's more important to me that I'm pumping students out there, and ain't nobody coming back from reboards. So my ego's getting me and everything. He says, okay, that's all well and good. He says, but if you want to advance. Now, what he didn't know, this was the first time he recognized that I didn't care if I advanced to chief petty officer. They were only rating 1 to 2 chiefs in my rate, machinist mate submarines. every year. So most nukes would just do 8 years and get out and go to the new commercial nuclear industry. That's what we were doing. But that particular year, the reason he's having this conversation with me is that's the first year that they increased the quotas. So the quotas went from 2 the previous year to I think like 35 that year. And he says, he says, have you seen your last 2 evals? I said, yeah. He says, you're ranked number 5 and number 6 of 105 first class petty officers, yet you can never be sailor of the quarter or sailor of the year. So all you're doing is you're getting credit for how you teach, how you instruct, how you facilitate, but your military bearing is what's lacking. So that's why nobody wants to put your picture on the wall. And it hurt, Enrique. It hurt. He says, because you don't value what we value as an organization, as nuclear power training unit, as the Navy, as a petty officer in the Navy. And I was like, wow. So I get home. He says, when you think about that, and if you want to change some things, I'm gonna help you out. If you don't, stay true to who you are. You'll be recognized as a really good instructor that came through here, of the hundreds and thousands of instructors that have come through here. And you will have impacted some people, but you probably will never know about it because nobody will ever see your picture on the wall. Nobody will ever, you'll just be another instructor that came through that people liked, and that's it. And you could do so much more to be valuable to the organization, and as well as recognize your own worth and what you bring to the table. And it hurts. So I get home, asked my wife, and my wife was like, why are you pissed off? I said, because my boss called me a S-bag, right? And that he didn't call me that, but that's how I received it. And she looked at me, this is my first wife. She looked at me, she says, well, are you? And then I got mad again because I'm like, how are you going to ask me that as my wife, right? And she just walked off. And I was like, and that was the coolest thing because it really made me have to look in the mirror and go, what do you value? And why aren't your values aligned with the organization's? So I did a personal inventory, and that day I committed to, I still wasn't the perfect sailor military bearing wise. Hell, even as a chief, I probably wasn't all the time, but in the back of my mind, I knew that this was where I had to be all in, you know what I mean? And it wasn't about being the number 1 sailor. I was never the number 1 sailor or anything like that. It was about closing the circle, making it a whole 360 degrees in terms of who I was, recognizing what my faults and my flaws were, shoring them up enough where they weren't going to be fatal flaws, or the failures, the weak link that causes failure at that level of the organization. I went back and talked to Chief Sykes about a week later, and I said, what do I have to do? I said, I don't want to be sailor of the year. I don't want to be sailor of the quarter. I still want to be liked and respected, but I want to be a sailor. And that was the beginning of where I would say things. And I never thought about even making chief or senior chief or master chief, but everything, that was the catalyst that wound up starting me on the path of getting selected early for everything and having multiple choices to make when I was coming up on EAOS. Multiple hard choices, which is a good thing to have. And as you can see, I told y'all during class, I've been getting out of the Navy now for 7 re-enlistments. And finally it was time to go. But I always went back to that particular episode or time where the switch was flipped, and I understood the importance of aligning my values with the organization's values, picking up additional values that would make me a better person, a better sailor, a better husband, a better father, the whole nine. And that's kind of the core of it.
Yeah, I love that story, and I was over here taking notes, writing stuff down because as you talking, things, just pop up in your head, and that won't be the last story we hear because, folks, if you know anything about Mike Jackson, He could tell you some stories. He's got some good ones. But I wrote down Day of Reckoning, right? Which is funny because when you talk about looking in the mirror, it's hard. It's hard
It
to
is.
have that mirror in front of you, have somebody tell you what they see in the reflection. You're like, hold up, that's not what I see. And most times those great leaders, because for folks that know ranking systems, right? He talked about chief, right? He talked about the chief talked to him, but then he says in the beginning, he started his story about chief warrant officer, right? So that means to me, the brother went up, right? And so if the brother went up, he also took you up by his conversation. And that's what a true leader does. A true leader identifies the potential in a person, is able to course correct, at least provide some sage counsel where they can
Mhm.
look in the mirror, make some adjustments, and as they go up, that sailor or that member or that person goes up as well. And
Yeah.
that's when you know you've done your job as a leader. When you can stand on one mountaintop, look at another mountaintop, and see that protege or that mentee and say, "What's going on?" And that's really where the joy of leadership
Yes.
is capped, right? That's where you get your your most joy out of. But you mentioned, when you was talking about values and you talking about how long it takes, I was starting to think about corporate America. Some have value statements,
Hmm.
some don't, right? I went into a job site and they had nothing. They had nothing. And so I questioned the leadership about value statements and mission and all this other things.
Right.
And so I was able to help them with that and they had it. But just because you have a value statement don't mean that the people in your company share that value.
Exactly.
And that's what your story brought me to as a learning tip for corporate America, those leading in positions of leadership. Just because you have it doesn't mean that you have it collectively. And so you, as a leader, have to look at what you have. And if you don't have anything, well, that tells you a lot. But if you do have something, then are you living those values? And
Exactly.
are you able to identify those that are not and help them to make a decision, right? Because everybody's got to decide,
Right.
but
Right.
make a decision as to whether they want to align themselves with your values and stick around. And because those that align themselves with your values, you are happy to have.
Exactly.
Um, and those that don't, you should be happy to let go,
Let go.
right?
Exactly.
Right? Because if you
Exactly.
can't, then you're keeping problems. But in any case, values is so important, but the leadership piece is so integral in the making sure that values are executed by identifying. And you cannot identify behind your desk, folks.
You can't.
You can't
You can't.
you can't do it from Zoom neither. So it's another challenge now because we're adding this cyber or this virtual element where
Yeah.
you can't get that interaction. And that's why I said earlier, yeah, I know I feel your pain. I'm a people person too. I need that interaction. But
Exactly.
but this is great conversation, and I love that you brought up that story uh, because it leads us to the next question, which how do you see values being part of leadership?
Yeah, well, I kind of touched on it a little bit. I know
Hmm.
I went back and forth on the
Hmm.
first question was more about me personally and my values, right? And then and why were they important to me? But I also dovetailed into leadership. I mean, it's a key piece, right? Because if you're a leader within an organization, and it starts at the top, right? If you're a leader in the organization, you have certain personal values that you bring to the table. And most leaders, if they are CEOs, they're going to establish and want to run their company based on their own personal beliefs, personal morals, and the things that they value that are important, right? And hopefully that starts from the core with getting the trust of your people. You want to build an organization that where people trust one another, they trust their leadership, their leaders above them to do the right thing, and that their leaders value the same core personal type things that they do, right? And so it's important that one, you have to start with that statement. You just said it perfectly, right? You walk into an organization and an organization doesn't have values, and that's easy for us. If I go into any kind of organization that I work for and I don't see and I don't hear the boss talking about um, what's important to him or her, or what's important to the organization, and I'm not talking about the financial bottom line, right? Great thing about my organization is we're nonprofit, so we don't have to worry about that kind of stuff. We have to worry about how we spend money, but we don't have to worry about we got to answer to other people, right? Um, and so if money's not the bottom line that you're thinking about, you're thinking about how you impact people, how you can help people grow, how you can help people ideally want to stay in your organization, want to be megaphones for your organization and free advertising. It has to start with what you value, what you bring to the table, what your expectations and standards are for operations. And that has to be clearly communicated and articulated, right? But that's just at the top. The more important piece is do your next levels, right? Your executive levels, your middle level managers and leaders, and even all the way down to your first line supervisors. Anybody that has supervisor on their name and above, right? The expectation is that they latch on to the values of the organization. But if they don't know them, if they're not, that means that they have to be communicated verbally, frequently, and the most important piece, you have to live them. That's the whole leadership by example piece. We say it as a cliche, right? Leadership by example. But the truth of the matter is, if there's a say-do gap between what you say about what it is you value, and then you treat somebody else differently than how you say you value that same thing, right? You don't show it, then you've lost them already. They're probably just working for you because the pay might be good or whatever the case may be, but they're not bought into the organization because they're not bought into the organization values. And so it's important that leaders understand that they have to be able to communicate that and articulate it and personalize it, not just sound like encyclopedia salespersons or car salespersons, but it's important for them. If I work for you, I want to see that what you just said about the company's values, I want you to be able to give it to me and how you tie it to your own personal values, how you align your personal values with that, and do some storytelling to pull me in to make me understand why I should align mine. And that's exactly what Ricky Sykes was able to do for me. I've had a lot of good CEOs that I had fireside chats with. I mentioned Captain Mark Johnson at Command Leadership School. I remember some of our fireside chats that we talked about these core things, and he lived it, he breathed it. I felt it when he said these things when we were having. I didn't even feel like he talked to me like I was a CMC. I felt like we were just two brothers in arms, kind of talking philosophically about these important aspects of leadership. And I think that's where it is. That's where the rubber meets the road. It boils down to leadership by example. You have to exemplify the things that you hold important to you, that drive you and motivate you to do and act and behave the way you do. You got to be able to articulate that connected to the organization's values so that people understand. And then you'll get the followership and the buy-in and them accepting those values as well. But if you don't, you know what I mean? Uh, then you're going to be an ineffective leader. And you're probably not going to be, I mean, if the organization realizes that you're not going to be a leader within that organization if you're not communicating it and living the values yourself.
Yeah,
And
one of the
the key is if it doesn't, and this is another piece of it, right? The key is if it's a value that you can't totally get in alignment with, right? How do you reconcile that and still be able to articulate it and communicate it to your people with authenticity that this is something you wrestle with? So you have to be authentic and let people know that tell your own story on how you got to where you were, not from a bragging standpoint, but how you changed your mindset and your behaviors based on how your values changed and where you found conflict um, in philosophically, not 180 degrees out, but just philosophically in how you viewed something. How did you reconcile it and still stay bought in and into the organization and committed to the organization? That's important as well because people need to see that. People don't want you to just be a company man or a company woman on, and you get paid to say that. You get a handsome salary, so you have to say that. They need to see it, and they need to see some humility in that aspect of where do you have some hangups with, because if a CEO changes out, the organization's values might change out, especially in corporate America, right? And that could be, now you have a decision you have to make. What if they aren't in alignment? What if they're totally 180 degrees out from how the previous boss was, and you really liked the previous boss? Now you got a decision. Well, can I readjust, or is it time for me to go because I just can't get in alignment with that?
Yeah, definitely a tough decision, and that's why it's so crucial. As you was talking, I envision these things, right? I envision a
Right.
CEO sitting in front of his whole company and talking about, let me talk to you about why these values mean something to me, and give a backstory or give an example where they can tie you into it, and more importantly, if you can get yourself to say, and if you see me not living by these, I give you full uh, full authority to come to me and tell me, hey, what you did was not in line, and I'll correct it myself,
Right.
because that type of transparency, that type of openness, it's a lot of people are like, oh, you don't want to do that, but you do want to do that. You
Right.
want people to understand that you're human, and just because you're the boss making whatever, and hey, in some cases they don't make whatever, right? They make
Right. Right.
zero,
Right.
depending
Right.
on the stage of their company.
Right.
But why are these things posted everywhere? Why you keep talking about them? Why are they so important? And then maybe you'll get some people to get on board a whole lot faster or a whole lot easier than
Exactly.
to try to figure it out themselves. And that's one thing that I seldom see. I've been at sites where the things are posted. I've
Right.
been in sites and I've looked in employee handbooks and that stuff is in there, but
Right.
it's never talked about. So
Never
you
talked
might as
about.
well never have it,
Right.
because it's not being talked about, it's not being generated. There's no buzz around, there's no knowledge around why these things exist. So I encourage
Exactly.
all CEOs that if you're listening to this, that you take maybe a step back and say, you know what, do I have values? Do I have those published? And more importantly, do I live those if they are published, so
Right.
that some people can follow and get in line. But that's wonderful. I love that. And so we get to a point where we're now we have our company, we're doing stuff, we're in leadership, we're exemplifying it, and but there might be some that have that hard time aligning. Let's say somebody else does, and there's some other values. How can you incorporate that? How would a leader incorporate those values into their day to day, or seek to incorporate those things into their day to day?
Well, it's kind of funny because leaders that do it right, it just happens. It's how you're naturally wired, right? The things that are important to you are the things that you wake up to and you go, everything. It's like the North Star when it comes to navigation. Everything is pointed towards that direction, right? And that's the reference point. So it's important for you to assess. And I talked about this a lot at the Leadership Schoolhouse, where if when you're aligning yourself and you don't have, what are your boundaries that you establish when you start drifting a little bit off course? What's your fix, right? Your fix is your values. if that makes sense. And I'm talking in navigation terms, right? We take a fix on the North Star or whatever to get where it is we want to go. So when you feel yourself drifting and compromised, not necessarily compromised, but maybe starting to second guess whether or not either your values differ from what the organization's values are, or your values different from your friends. And let's not even talk about organizations. Let's talk about your day-to-day life. Then you have a decision that you have to make in terms of, am I getting outside of my comfort zone? Let me take another fix to what is important to me. So I give you a clear example. And I told you I was going to talk about this a little bit, right? So I just recently, in preps for my current role, I had to actually go through the course that I'm lead facilitator for, and it's next level leaders, so middle level managers, right? Middle level managers and director kind of level. Um, and I had to take a conflict mode assessment. Um, I'm not going to give any plugs for any particular company, but it's a conflict mode assessment. Much like the Hogan assessment that you had taken, but it's a little bit scaled back. It's more just your conflict style. And you get your results back like right away. So when I reviewed my first report, I've taken it twice. I reviewed my first report. My first report came out that I was in the low 80 percentile as an accommodator. And there are 5 different conflict modes: accommodator, compromiser, competitor, avoider. I can't remember what the other one is. But I'm an accommodator, right? Which means I more often than not, I value relationships than results. The second time I took it was before my wife passed away this year. So my wife passed away from cancer back in May. And, with COVID hitting and everything else, I was, as bad as it sounds, I was fortunate enough to be able to work from home in Charleston, where my home still was, as opposed to having to be going back and forth from Atlanta. So I took this assessment again, right before she passed. It was when I was doing I had a class in March, and I decided to go ahead, since the students were doing it, go ahead and do it, because I start thinking differently about relationships. Not just my relationship with my wife, but relationships in general with my friends, with my family. And it was eating at me because I didn't feel like, at that time, I felt like I was differing from what I said I valued. I said I valued friendships. I said I valued family, and I'm still wrestling with it, Enrique, because I'm a closet extrovert. I like my me time. I can get out and about, but I like my me time. So when I get off work, if I'm not wrapped into work, I'm not, my time seems to I don't have enough time in a day to be on the phone with friends or to be on the phone with family. And my family let me have it too. So they're keeping me honest. But what happened was I took this assessment again. And the next time I took it, I was 100 percentile, meaning I answered every question that had to deal with being an accommodator, the way an accommodator would. And that drastic shift of about, I think I was 82 percentile first. So I was high already. I was over the 75 percentile, but I was 100%, which means that I totally value relationships more than results. So if you put me on a team of 5 people, and let's say all of us have different conflict styles, right? Somebody that's a competitor that wants to value the results more. And then me, who's an extreme with relationships. Let's just say it's a 2-person team. Me against a competitor, 100% competitor. We're not going to get anything done because, we'll get something done, but it won't be on my terms, right? It'll be on the competitor's terms, because I'm totally going to accommodate that individual, because I don't want to sour the relationship. And so going through what I went through and what I'm still going through with the loss of my wife, it made me think about what's important to people. And I'll put that over, right, wrong, or indifferent. my personal belief in terms of being an effective leader and what works for me is it starts with relationships. You don't have to be extreme like I am 100%, but if you don't recognize the value of establishing relationships, building trust with people in your life, the people that you work with, your boss, the people that work for you, um, then you're not going to be an effective leader. You might be profitable, but at what expense, right? You're going to see your retention numbers and people not wanting to stay in the organization. So I think you really got to understand how to balance the competing values of results, getting results, and relationships in that regard. It is a perfect assessment to take. There are plenty of I know companies that do different types of assessments. This particular one um, was very instrumental for me as I continue to navigate through what's important for me, because truthfully I still wrestle with it. So I need people, to keep me honest on it. You ask, what can you do and what kind of things can people do in their day-to-day lives? For me, I have to make it easy for folks to hold me to task. My mother had and she's gonna get mad at me if she sees this podcast. My mother called me on my birthday, and she was a little bit selfish because she wanted to see me. And naturally, my family doesn't get to see me in Columbia, South Carolina that often. Um, they value fellowship. They value breaking bread. I don't value it as much. I take it for granted. But the loss of my wife has made me think really long and hard about that and changing that behavior and that perspective. And it's hard for me because I'm still wired to, when I'm at work, I'm engrossed in work, and I'll still put in a 12 or 14-hour day if I have to. It doesn't bother me. But then when I get off, then I want my me time. I don't want to be bothered. So my mother calls me on my birthday and says, I just need to tell you this. And this is, she didn't even say happy birthday initially. She says, um, you need to come home more often. And I was like, and she was hurt, and I got mad, man. I was like, I'm going back and forth to Charleston. I still have my home in Charleston. I got to go check up on the house. I'm still working. I'm planning all of these things for these leadership seminars that we have to do and the potential travel that we have to do. And I'm like, I just don't have enough time. Back to, if I valued relationships and family, right, then I'll make it happen. And I still wasn't making it happen. So I got off the phone feeling some kind of way. I didn't feel my birthday was all that special. I don't put too much emphasis on it. But I got mad because the thought process was, come on, Ma, you're going to do this to me on my birthday, right? And so out of guilt, the next weekend, I surprised her, drove to Columbia from Atlanta, and surprised and told I was going to take her out to eat. Took her out to eat, and we talked, and she didn't back down. She said, I apologize for, she did apologize. I apologize for what I said on my birthday, but I'm not apologizing that I said it, because I still feel that way and I want to see my son. And, I started crying and everything, saying, you got this on tape too, so somebody's going to hear that. All my colleagues, and Mike Jackson crying. And because it hurt, I hurt my mom. And I get choked up thinking about it right now. But she held me accountable. So you talk about what leaders can do in day-to-day lives. Get yourself an accountability coach. We talk about this at my current job, to help you stay on course, to help you take your fix on when you start drifting away from the things that you said you value. If family is really important to you, if work-life balance is really important to you, then get somebody to kick you out of the office. And you know me, Enrique, even when I was at the schoolhouse, I was still at the schoolhouse. It's shore duty, and I was still working like I was on a sub or an aircraft carrier, like the workday didn't end. I remember plenty of days where me and both of my bosses up there would be sitting there and it's 6 o'clock. Now I was a geographical bachelor, but I still didn't put any emphasis on the life piece of the work-life balance equation. And my mom held me to task on that. And believe it or not, some of my friends are holding me to task on that. I got a plug right now with your podcast that I would ask some of my, I feel guilty. Um, I value my place and what I should be doing to give back um, to the folks coming up behind us that are serving now, right? And that are getting ready and deciding to make the transition to corporate America. How can I do that? And I need people to hold me to task on it and be unapologetic about it, whether that be shoot me a Facebook message, I am on Facebook or LinkedIn or email or text or whatever the case may be, and be unapologetic about it. I might get in my feelings for a minute, but I'm telling you what holds me to true to that is I'll think about it afterwards and go, hey, yo, you said you value you value your relationships, you value your friendships. Um, I don't want to just call people shipmates. The people that I really love serving with, I want to be able to say they're my friends. And I got to get better at that. So I need an accountability coach. I need my colleagues to say, hey, Mike, man, you need to get out. You need to go do this. Did you go see your family this weekend or whatever the case may be? Because, and back to the comparison with the fact that I lost my wife, it really makes me think about, time is a valuable commodity. We value it, but we take it for granted sometimes as well. So you need ask for that help and allow people that latitude to give you that help when you find yourself drifting a little bit with that. With the things that come naturally for you, just keep doing it. Keep that as your North Star and your fix and take your fix on that and continue moving forward with it because now you're doing the leadership by example, the living by example piece. And I guess the last thing that I would say on that is you talked about this earlier, and we talked about it before we went kind of official, was the humble piece, right? I have three things that I used to, if you remember, I wrote up on the board the last day of class, or the first and the last day of class up in Newport. It was, uh, leadership is about influence. Um, the first question I asked was, why would somebody want to follow your lead? And then the last thing was, aha. And I said, I'll talk to y'all about what aha means at the last day of class, but just write it down. And so I'll touch on it real quick here because it does get back to the values piece, right? The aha, the first A is approachable. Are you approachable? Are you as approachable as you think you are? Will people walk up to you and feel comfortable talking to you about the things that they have issues with, the things that they are wrestling with and challenges with within the organization, within you as a leader? Do you have that open door that really is open, figuratively and literally, right? If nobody's bringing anything to you, then you might not be as approachable as you think. Um, Humble. We talked about eating that humble pie daily, and I would say take take small bites every day. You don't have to eat the whole slice. You don't have to eat the whole pie, but keep a pie baked and eat a piece of it, uh, periodically throughout the day, and have some humility and shame about your stuff. Recognize that things are way bigger than you. It's not just about you. Be a little selfish when you need to, but recognize that, Mick Ponder talked about this with the servant leadership piece and the service piece in general, right? As a leader, it ain't about you. It's about serving your people and the true essence of servant leadership. And I don't mean that in a biblical sense. I mean that more so in a, I work for you, you don't work for me. Have some humility about you. And I like the inverted pyramid thing that he talked about in his podcast, about, you're the leader at the bottom and everything, and you have everything above you that is resting on your shoulders that you are supporting. That's important. And then the last piece is the awareness. And I talked about self-awareness. If somebody else has to tell you that the emperor is walking around with no pants on, then then you are way behind the power curve in that regard. Have enough self-awareness of what your flaws are when you're drifting off of your core values, and be able to get yourself back on course before somebody else has to do that. That's probably the piece where a lot of leaders fail the most, is somebody has to tell them that they don't have any pants on, and by the time they do that, they've already done something that's gotten them in trouble. You know what I mean? I think
Yeah.
that's it in a nutshell.
No, I thoroughly enjoyed listening to that, and wholeheartedly agree. Only solidifies the my selection of my advisor, because I
I
tell
don't know
you,
about all that.
uh, uh,
I'm part of a group of heavy hitters, man. I'm humble and was a little bit nervous today before we came on, man. I was like, I hope I can do this some justice, and people get something out of this when I saw the lineup. So I hope I'm holding my own in the batter's box here.
well, you definitely have, and folks, that we started this, and I told you, right, it's a 5 week uh, highlight of true leaders that I believe have not only impacted my life, but continue to impact my life, and as well as advisors. But I want to recap to some things that I was writing down as you was talking, and talking about values, which is you know, folks, and just a real quick summary, and I hope you listen to all of the things that have been said, but a fix, have a fix, have your true north. Those are your values. And then, when you go back to that periodically, make yourself check those and check yourself against those. Number two, look in the mirror. Look in the mirror, right? We just talked about pants down. But realize it yourself, awareness. Get it to yourself first. Say, oh wow, before somebody else does, because guess what? Everybody knows.
Yeah,
Everybody knows where you are and where you stacked up with values. Um, if you're in a company and you're the head, remember that not everybody could be aligned with your values. You need to check that. You need to
yes,
go and check that. But the very first check is your check, right? So
exactly.
look in that mirror, check, make sure you align, because that's the only way you're going to get other people to align. And then we was talking about values, and I wrote and I was writing down, man, what are minds immediately, right? In mind right now, as I'm listening to Mike Jackson and he talked about values, what are minds? And I wrote truth. Truth is primal for me. If it does not revolve around truth, then it's a lie, and I don't want to have no part of it, right? People, people are my joy. And we're in the leadership business because people, we are interested in people getting better, becoming the best version of themselves today, right? And so people, accountability, which is part of your, of the conversation of, hey, we need that piece, because you know uh, sometimes you can go astray, and having all the best tools at your disposal and all the education under your belt, still you can go astray. So accountability, execution, right? Because if you can learn all this, but if you can't execute it, why why for?
Right.
And lastly, celebration, right? Which is, I want to end this my little chat here with celebration. Um, I celebrate you, Mike. I
Thank you.
celebrate, Mick Pond Hurd. I celebrate, Boris Bolano, that that just was the last podcast. John Minyard, Fleet John Minyard. I celebrate him, and I celebrate Mick Pond, Dwayne Bushy. You guys, and Dwayne is next. and I'm looking forward to that. But you guys have
I'm looking
um,
forward to hearing him. He was a guest speaker at my CPO birthday ball in Charleston when I was a base CMC there, and he's a good talker, so I like him.
Well, I mean, but I celebrate you guys. I thank you from the bottom of my heart for, putting up with me and advising me and your role with Triad. And you guys have been a great joy to have around, and I love being surrounded by you. Uh, and I hope that everybody listening has surrounded themselves with key people that will bring the best out of you. That is where values really come to life. You can have your own values, but look at other people's values, and if they align, hey, start amassing your core five, if I may, because it's important in leadership to execute values. You need a team, but you need that. You need the mirror. You need your true north. And I won't go over the list again, but I hope that this was an enjoyable podcast for everybody. Mike, thanks again.
Thank you,
If
Enrique.
somebody wanted to get a hold of you, how can they do that?
Multiple ways. Obviously, I'm on Facebook as Mike Jackson. I know there's a million of us, but I'm in Charleston, South Carolina. You'll see me along with my queen, still in the background on my photo if you're looking for me. So you can IM me through Facebook, LinkedIn. I have two different profiles on LinkedIn. I still have my old profile that has me in my military uniform, but the most current one that I use is just has me, matter of fact, with my shadow box in a business suit. And then, or at my email address here at Institute of Nuclear Power Operations, Jackson MK at inpo.org. My personal email address, mjbenz2000 at yahoo.com. And I'm not gonna get my phone number out over there, but they can hit me up via email that way. And most folks that know me already have my phone number, so they know how to get at me or point somebody in the right direction.
All right, folks. So thank you, Mike. And I'll put some of that information as part of the video so you'll be able to know how to contact him. But Mike, once again, thank you for being with us. And for all of you, you know how we love to end this show. Success to you.
Thank you.